They crossed the line. The unthinkable has finally become our absolute reality today. Every foreign ministry on earth is panicking in real time. A terrifying geopolitical threshold was just permanently shattered. Israel just bombed the house of Russian culture. This specific building sits in Nabatieh, deep inside southern Lebanon. It does not belong to Hezbollah or any Iranian proxy militia. It is the sovereign property of the Russian Federation. This structure is an official state agency outpost. It operates as a direct formal extension of Moscow. Russia has already confirmed the military strike happened. The terrifying silence following that confirmation changes absolutely everything. Intelligence agencies are desperately parsing every single back-channel communication. They are waiting for the official statement from the Kremlin. The exact wording of that document will dictate global survival. Precision matters now more than ever before. Israel did not hit a building with a peripheral Russian connection. They did not accidentally strike near a diplomatic installation. They directly targeted legally protected sovereign Russian cultural property. That property belongs to a permanent UN Security Council member. Russia is not just another player on the regional chessboard. They are one of 9 countries possessing confirmed nuclear weapons. They control approximately 6,000 deployed nuclear warheads. This represents the largest active nuclear arsenal on the planet. Russian military doctrine regarding sovereign territory is absolutely clear. An unprovoked kinetic strike warrants an overwhelmingly disproportionate strategic response. They do not view their foreign outposts as expendable real estate. They view them as sacred extensions of the Russian motherland. We must remember the terrifying precedent set weeks ago. Israel directly bombed the Bushehr nuclear reactor complex. Russian engineers and technicians built and operated that specific facility. Russia absorbed that aggressive act in total, absolute silence. Military planners in Tel Aviv interpreted that silence dangerously. They assumed Moscow had flashed a green light for escalation. They believed Russian restraint was a permanent, unbreakable policy. That single assumption is a catastrophic miscalculation of reality. We thought deterrence was holding across the broader Middle East. Western media completely ignored the puzzling restraint from Moscow. Everyone assumed the status quo was securely locked in place. The market explicitly priced in a contained regional proxy war. That illusion of control just violently shattered overnight. The old rules of engagement are officially dead and buried. Diplomatic guardrails have entirely vanished from the geopolitical map. We are operating entirely in uncharted, highly volatile territory. Russia watched American bases in Iraq turn to ash. They watched Iranian drones systematically dismantle secure military outposts. They watched Gulf security architecture disintegrate in real time. Decades of American military investment vanished without a trace. They watched the vital Strait of Hormuz effectively close. Commercial shipping vanished from the world's most critical energy choke point. Oil prices are spiraling toward truly unthinkable mathematical scenarios. Analysts are absolutely terrified by the baseline projections today. Moscow watched the entire region slowly burn week by week. They issued predictable statements and called for immediate ceasefires. They used the hollow language of restrained diplomatic condemnation. They calculated their exact position while holding their ground. That quiet patience was just tested in an unprecedented manner. Attacking a military proxy is a standard act of war. Striking sovereign cultural property crosses a totally different legal red line. The facility in Nabatieh was never a weapons depot. It was never a secret command and control node. It was absolutely not a hidden logistics hub for militias. Military planners cannot justify this strike using dual-use infrastructure designations. The building was a library and a cultural performance space. It was a center for language instruction and cultural exchange. It represented the quiet projection of Russian global soft power. It proudly flew a large Russian flag on its roof. It was staffed entirely by Russian civilian diplomatic personnel. This was unambiguously Russian territory sitting outside their physical borders. International law specifically protects exactly this kind of civilian infrastructure. The 1954 Hague Convention was written precisely for this nightmare scenario. It establishes an elevated level of absolute legal protection. The Convention protects cultural property regardless of the geographic location. It ignores whatever strategic calculations the attacking military forces claim. Israel is not a recognized signatory to this specific international convention. However, the Russian Federation absolutely is a formal signatory. Russia does not need to cite obscure international protocols today. They do not need a future war crimes tribunal ruling. They only need to make a single strategic military decision. That decision is currently sitting on a desk in Moscow. Someone with supreme authority is reviewing those exact strike options. Every geopolitical analyst is terrified of the impending operational answer. We are no longer asking what the Kremlin will say. We are desperately asking what the Kremlin will do. Those are fundamentally different questions in this chaotic new reality. Russia has said a great deal throughout this escalating conflict. Their physical actions have remained deliberately measured and perfectly inconclusive. That structural gap between words and actions kept peace alive. That vital gap may have just permanently closed forever. Option 1 represents the diplomatic outcome the world desperately wants. Russia issues a violently worded formal protest through legal channels. They demand full accountability at the UN Security Council immediately. They summon the Israeli ambassador for a gravely serious conversation. They continue their foundational policy of highly restrained diplomatic condemnation. The international community collectively exhales and pretends everything is fine. This is pure hope, and hope is not a strategy. Option 2 is where the strategic math becomes truly terrifying. Russia decides the Bush-era attack and Nabatieh cross a threshold. They realize their massive regional investments are being systematically dismantled. They conclude they can no longer absorb these direct insults. Russia alters its military posture without firing a single missile. They do not need to deploy Russian infantry across borders. They can operate entirely in the shadows of asymmetric warfare. They can fundamentally destroy the military balance overnight. Consider the lethal military assets Russia could hand to Iran. They could deliver generational leaps in advanced air defense systems. The terrifying S-400 and S-500 platforms would flood the theater. These systems far exceed anything Israel has encountered before. This specific transfer would eliminate the current operational flying window. Israel has relied on that vulnerable window for several months. Russian satellite intelligence could start flowing directly to Iranian commanders. The accuracy calculus of every Iranian strike would immediately skyrocket. The Iranian commanders would no longer guess where air defenses operate. They would receive real-time targeting telemetry directly from Russian satellites. This completely changes the mathematics of drone swarm saturation attacks. Israeli interceptor stocks would be depleted at an unsustainable velocity. Russian electronic warfare capabilities are historically unmatched and highly devastating. They could systematically degrade American GPS and regional communication networks. These sophisticated cyber operations cannot be easily patched or countered. Israeli military operations would essentially fly completely blind into combat. Russia has always possessed these apocalyptic tools in their arsenal. The crucial question was always whether they would actually provide them. Until last night, the answer remained a cautious, calculated negative. The strike on Nabatieh just forcefully changed that geopolitical calculus. Option 3 is the absolute nightmare scenario nobody publicly discusses. Serious analysts are quietly gaming this out in secured rooms. Nabatieh is not viewed as an isolated tragic accident today. It is viewed as the final trigger for global escalation. Russia concludes their extended policy of restraint has definitively failed. They realize patience is actively inviting further direct military aggression. They calculate the cost of inaction exceeds the cost of war. They decide a massive, demonstrable kinetic response is absolutely required. Great powers have made this exact dark calculation throughout history. The historical record of what follows is written in blood. Let us return to the terrifying math of the regional map. Look closely at the unseen dominoes falling across the globe. None of the existing global pressures have paused to wait. The fires do not stop for diplomatic cables to clear. The intersecting crises run on their own devastating simultaneous timelines. The Strait of Hormuz remains entirely closed to global shipping. Global maritime insurance markets are completely frozen in absolute terror. Underwriters are refusing to write policies for any regional shipping. Premium costs have gone vertical overnight, halting massive cargo fleets. The logistical arteries of the global economy are actively severing. Kuwait is watching a rapidly ticking oil storage countdown clock. They have approximately 14 days of remaining physical storage capacity. When those tanks hit absolute maximum capacity, production fully stops. It does not slowly taper off. It completely flatlines. Iraq is already burning through its final desperate buffer zone. They have roughly 6 days of critical storage capacity remaining. The Strait of Hormuz closure makes exporting this oil impossible. A total halt in Gulf production means vertical market panic. Global energy prices will not experience a gradual, manageable increase. The economic impact will be immediate, brutal, and completely vertical. Analysts previously modeled worst-case scenarios at extreme market prices. Those terrifying outlier projections are now the baseline accepted reality. The global energy supply chain is fracturing in multiple directions. Qatar has completely halted all outbound liquefied natural gas shipments. Europe restructured its entire energy grid around this exact supply. They abandoned Russian gas pipelines to rely heavily on Qatar. Now, Europe faces the simultaneous loss of both critical lifelines. The Russian gas is gone. The Qatari ships are halted. European winter reserves are stressed vastly beyond their design limits. Utility planners never modeled for a total dual-source supply collapse. Governments are desperately trying to manage this escalating security crisis. Emergency imports and forced demand reduction measures are failing rapidly. Public assurances are collapsing against the cold arithmetic of supply. The global energy market is staring directly into the abyss. Meanwhile, the Iranian midnight strike cycle continues without any hesitation. This is a structured campaign of massive simultaneous military pressure. Gulf infrastructure burns in the morning under drone swarm attacks. Naval assets take heavy kinetic damage in the early afternoon. American military installations face relentless bombardment in the late evening. Israel endures heavy ballistic missile strikes directly at midnight. This operational cycle was never designed to pause for diplomacy. It was engineered to crush defense systems through pure exhaustion. The attackers want to prevent any defensive recovery windows opening. Every single interceptor system is operating under maximum critical stress. No target ever gets the required time to properly restock. The logic of attrition is perfectly cold and highly mathematical. Israel's defensive radar and alert networks are deeply degraded today. They are operating at a fraction of their original capability. Weeks of targeted precision strikes severely crippled the detection infrastructure. The network has not been magically repaired overnight. The civilian population is receiving vastly less early warning time. The system was originally built to deliver critical survival margins. The Israeli government openly acknowledged this terrifying defensive capability gap. This is the most significant military admission of the war. That dangerous vulnerability is real, and it remains totally unpatched. The Iranian ballistic response cycle has absolutely not ended yet. Advanced hypersonic missiles recently annihilated oil refinery infrastructure in Haifa. That strike was a direct reciprocal response to Israeli actions. Those devastating strikes were absolutely not the final military move. They were simply the latest kinetic exchange in an ongoing war. Neither side has defined a clear endpoint for this violence. There is no visible sequence of actions that achieves peace. Every single day adds a fresh dimension of unmitigated catastrophe. The conflict map expands into territories previously considered totally safe. Azerbaijan is now heavily drawn into the Iranian warning framework. American water infrastructure in Iran was actively targeted and destroyed. Iran is now openly threatening critical Gulf water desalination plants. These massive industrial facilities are the lifeblood of entire cities. Gulf populations possess zero natural freshwater reserves to rely upon. Taking these plants offline is an immediate existential mass casualty event. The destruction of these plants means total societal collapse overnight. You cannot sustain millions of people without functioning desalination infrastructure. Imagine a modern metropolis suddenly losing all its drinking water. Millions of people would be forced into an immediate exodus. There are no contingency plans for a rapid mass evacuation. The regional stability would collapse into pure, unmitigated, chaotic violence. European energy security is collapsing in parallel with Gulf survival. The global economic architecture is fracturing under the immense pressure. Oman is historically the most cautious state in the region. They have officially broken their long silence to demand peace. Even the quietest diplomatic actors see the terrifying cliff edge. Passive observation is no longer a viable survival strategy today. Every new geographic dimension arrived without any adequate advance warning. Each shocking development radically changed the shape of the war. None of these deeply complex intersecting crises have been resolved. Today, a heavily armed nuclear superpower joins that volatile list. Russia is no longer a passive observer in the Middle East. They are not simply a diplomatic participant proposing ceasefire frameworks. They are a sovereign victim of a direct Israeli strike. Their flag and cultural property just took a kinetic hit. This exact catastrophic outcome did not magically develop overnight. It was born from weeks of unchecked, escalating military violence. Each strike was absorbed, normalized, and followed by worse attacks. Neither side modeled where this bloody sequence would ultimately lead. Political leaders are trapped by their own maximalist public rhetoric. Trump promised a devastating attack unlike anything seen in history. He has not defined the actual military or strategic objective. He simply demands total capitulation from a hardened Iranian regime. Iran has shown absolutely zero indication of surrendering to pressure. Netanyahu publicly declared that Israel will fight to the bitter end. He defines this end as the total neutralization of threats. He never specifies what battlefield steps achieve that impossible miracle. Two stubborn leaders refuse to define what actual victory means. They will not stop, but they cannot define the finish line. No crisis management system was built to handle this speed. We are facing unprecedented simultaneity of massive global security failures. Crisis management depends entirely on predictable, rational state actor behavior. It relies on established red lines and clear diplomatic signaling. When a nuclear superpower's property is bombed, those models break. We are flying completely blind into a Category 5 geopolitical hurricane. We are all waiting for the official statement from Moscow. When it drops, the specific language will carry immense weight. It will account for every single strike they previously absorbed. It will reflect every ignored protest and every silent recalculation. The drafting of that specific Russian document is highly methodical. Words are chosen for their exact, lethal legal implications globally. It is not an emotional reaction. It is cold mathematical logic. They are calculating the exact trajectory of their geopolitical revenge. Analysts have been forcefully redrawing the conflict map every 48 hours. Every time they established boundaries, those boundaries immediately dissolved entirely. They factored in ruined pipelines and burning Iraqi military bases. Now they must factor in a direct strike on Russia. The map now features a bright, terrifying, uncrossable red line. It runs from a destroyed civilian building in southern Lebanon. It leads directly into the Kremlin's most sensitive strategic calculations. It forces Moscow to decide what they will permanently accept. It tests what they will tolerate from the United States. It tests what they will absorb from Israeli military forces. The ambiguity is gone. Russian sovereign property was definitively bombed. Russia has been strategically, deliberately, and unmistakably patient until now. That patience looked like a permanent, unbreakable geopolitical foreign policy. It was a calculated waiting game that just violently ended. The ensuing question will define the next phase of history. It will actively reshape the entire fundamental global world order. The question is terrifyingly simple, but currently impossible to answer. What did Vladimir Putin decide that specific building was worth? The consequences of that absolute decision will cross all borders. They will never remain contained within the rubble of Lebanon. The shockwaves will hit every foreign ministry on earth. Old world security assumptions are completely dead. The oil is draining, the gas is halted, the base is rubble. In Moscow, a devastating response doctrine is drafted. Every intelligence service holds its breath. The silence is deafening. The map of involved actors grows without restraint. Israel pulled a nuclear superpower into the crosshairs. We are staring at the unthinkable. The threshold is crossed. There's no going back. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Share this to feed the algorithm. We are actively watching the wire for Moscow's response.